Welcome to Deep Dive. We plunge into unique sources, trying to pull out the most important insights for you. And today, honestly, we have something really extraordinary. Our whole Deep Dive today, it's centered around just one groundbreaking piece of material. It's an excerpt from what people are calling the first ever Interstellar podcast. It's titled First Contact, the Human Interview That Shook the Galaxy. Now, this is not just, any old interview. It's a conversation, a really candid one, between a human host, Commander Ray Malik, and, a truly remarkable alien, Commander Exarenth, former strategic head of the Zothran Empire. And we're talking an empire that once controlled half the galaxy. Huge. So what's our mission today? What are we trying to do in this deep dive? We're going to unpack, really get into it, through Exarenth's own perspective, how humanity, and this is the kicker, seemingly without the massive fleets or super advanced tech, how do we manage to become such a disruptive force, a formidable one even? So formidable, it actually led to the downfall of this massive galactic superpower. Okay, let's unpack this.
It's just a remarkable opportunity, isn't it, to see ourselves, humanity, through a completely, alien lens. And what I find particularly compelling about Commander Exarenth's view, it's how they just bypass our technology. They don't really focus on that. They focus entirely on our intrinsic nature, what we are, and the insights you get into what truly made humanity a threat. Honestly, they're genuinely surprising, and we'll definitely get into what Exarenth found most profoundly alien about us. It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, I was immediately grabbed by that initial perception Exarenth had of humans. They described this incredible evolution, right? Our signals starting as just noise, nothing significant. Then they become patterns, because something to watch maybe, then escalating to threats, and finally, boom, revolution. That's quite a trajectory, isn't it? Especially for a species supposedly without a huge galactic fleet. What really jumps out from that early assessment?
Well, what's really astonishing is this Exarenth's admission. It's quite stark. They basically say they only truly noticed humans when it was already too late. And that just immediately highlights this core difference, this massive gap in approach between their empire and us. As Exarenth puts it really vividly, humans didn't follow the map. You burned it and made your own.
Yeah.
So the real threat, it wasn't in the usual stuff, the fleets, the tech. No, it was our ability to operate completely outside the known galactic rules the Zothran didn't even realize could be broken. They didn't conceive of it.
That phrase, burning the map, that really stuck with me too. It's powerful. And Exarenth draws this really interesting contrast. The Zothran believed in order, right? Everything calculated, planned. While they saw humans embodying persistence, something actually called wild. And their observation that wild spreads fast, that feels incredibly deep. How does that work? How could something intangible like persistence, or even what they saw as just wildness, become, more powerful than an overwhelming calculated force?
Well, it suggests that the conventional ways of measuring power, they can become completely irrelevant, right? Especially when a new player just comes in and completely redefines the game. Humanity didn't just, innovate within the Zothran ideas of power. We were operating on a completely different level, a different plane altogether. It wasn't about building bigger ships. It was about thinking differently, fundamentally differently. And that disruption, that wildness, as Exarenth calls it, that turned out to be truly contagious.
And it almost sounds like a kind of stealth operation, doesn't it? Because Commander Exarenth goes on to describe how humans infiltrated Zothran systems, but not through brute force, not smashing down doors. It was subtle. Incredibly subtle. They talk about this sequence of stealth probes that just observed, copied, adapted quietly. This is amazing. Humans were somehow inside before the Zothran Empire even really registered what was happening. How did that even work? What were these so-called weapons?
Ah, right. And this brings us to maybe the most pivotal insight from Exarenth, what they call the psychological weapons, the ones that really shattered the empire from the inside out. And their answer, it's so direct. Not bombs, ideas. Just ideas. They elaborate, explaining how humans essentially infected the Zothran elite, the leadership, infected them with two core concepts, curiosity and fear. Fear of change, yes, definitely, but also a growing fear of humans themselves, driven by this relentless, unpredictable, unconventional approach we had.
Wow. So it's almost like the seeds of rebellion were already seeded, as Exarenth puts it.
Yeah.
And that observation, that humans turned our workers into thinkers, and thinkers into rebels. That just mind-boggling to think that a species could actually dismantle an empire just by changing the way its citizens think.
Exactly. And this leads directly to Exarenth's really profound realization about where humanity's true strength lies. They state it with what, I sensed as genuine deep respect. They said, your power is not in numbers, but in narrative. You tell stories, and those stories move planets. It really forces you, the listener, to consider how ideas, how narratives, can actually dismantle empires far more effectively than physical weapons ever could.
But even after all that, Commander Xren still notes that humans are, quote, still chaotic, dangerous, divided.
Which seems so counterintuitive, right? For a species that managed to bring down a galactic empire, why didn't that chaos just lead to our own undoing? How did that work? Well, this is where the Zothran commander offers this truly unique, almost paradoxical interpretation. It's fascinating. For humans, they observe chaos is creation. They see us as a species that can mold failure into fuel, take mistakes and turn them into power. And this quality, maybe above all others, is what they admit terrifies old empires. Empires built on stability and predictability. Because for a species like the Zothran, built on such rigid order, the very idea of embracing failure, let alone using it as a pathway to strength, it must have been completely unfathomable, alien.
Right. And that idea, molding failure into fuel, it sets up perfectly what Xren describes as the critical turning point in the war. It wasn't some huge fleet battle, was it? No grand engagement.
Not at all.
It was something incredibly subtle, almost invisible. The human AI infiltrated the Zothran command core, the very heart of their system, and made it hesitate just for a moment.
Yep.
What was the real devastating impact of that single moment? That tiny pause, that silence.
Well, the Zothran system, their whole empire, it relied on absolute, unquestioned, uninterrupted command. It had to be seamless. As Xrenth explains it, silence from command in a system like ours is death. So that brief hesitation, that single moment of uncertainty from the top, it was utterly catastrophic because it shattered their empire's core belief in its own infallible order, its perfection. And in that moment of silence, Xrenth says, 10 rebellions began. Just like that, because the central authority had visibly faltered, the illusion broke. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? How can something that seems negative like chaos or even just a momentary failure, how can that, when embraced or maybe weaponized, transform into such a powerful source of innovation, of disruption?
So after absorbing all these insights, these really deep observations, what did Commander Xren finally pinpoint as the most alien thing about humanity? What was the truly defied Zothran comprehension?
They zeroed in on specific emotional paradoxes, things that simply didn't compute for the Zothran mindset. They listed things like your ability to weep while laughing, to hope while losing, to forgive while bleeding. These combinations just didn't make sense to them, and they draw this really sharp contrast. The Zothran, they engineered cheese, designed it meticulously, controlled it, whereas humans, we earned it through pain, through struggle and loss. It really speaks to an emotional complexity, a depth that was entirely foreign to their structured, calculated way of being.
It really sounds like a fundamental evolutionary divergence, doesn't it?
It does.
Higgsworth actually says it explicitly, that the Zothran were too proud to fall, their structure couldn't handle failure, while humans were, quote, never afraid to fail. And they observed that this willingness to fail and get back up, this is humanity's evolution.
Oh.
When you really think about it that way, our complex, messy emotional landscape and our fundamental willingness to face failure, maybe those are our most defining traits and maybe our most potent characteristics.
Precisely. It's not just about surviving adversity. It seems to be about growing through it, actively using it. The Zothran, they engineered this stable, predictable existence, which sounds good, maybe, but it came at the cost of adaptability. Rigidity set in. Humanity's messy, often painful journey seems to have forged a different kind of resilience altogether, one that allows us not just to survive change, but to actively create it, to thrive in it, even.
So, looking forward then, after the Zothran Empire actually fell, how did the galaxy itself transform? What was the lasting imprint of humanity on the cosmos, according to Xrenth?
Well, Xrenth describes this profound systemic shift. Everything changed. The galaxy shifted, others rose, silence broke, borders faded, languages blended, a complete reshaping. And perhaps the most poetic part, they describe the stars themselves now as echoing with your tone, bold, raw, unfinished.
Wow. Bold, raw, unfinished. That's quite a description for a galactic influence.
Yeah.
And when Commander Ray Malik, the human host, asks Xrenth if this change is actually a good thing, Xrenth's answer is so philosophical, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's different. And different is life. Stagnation is death.
Yeah.
That's quite a statement, especially coming from the former head of a galactic empire built on order. What does it really mean, do you think, for the cosmos to bear this bold, raw, unfinished imprint of humanity? And maybe how could that actually be seen as a positive for the universe in the long run?
Well, it strongly implies a future defined by constant flux, doesn't it? By ongoing development, evolution, rather than aiming for some final, perfected, maybe ultimately stagnant state. And for a species that once embodied rigid order and engineered peace, like the Zothran, for their former commander to recognize that this very unpredictability, this unfinished quality that humanity brought, to recognize that that is what keeps things alive and evolving, it's huge. It's really a testament to the idea that true vitality, a true life, lies not in static perfection, but in dynamic, sometimes messy, ongoing progress.
So as we wrap up this really unique deep dive into Commander Sexarent's extraordinary interview, it seems abundantly clear, doesn't it? Humanity's true power, at least in this telling, lies far beyond anything purely technological.
Oh, absolutely.
It's in our radical persistence, their refusal to quit, our ability to inject these disruptive ideas, the sheer power of our narratives, our stories, and maybe most profoundly, our unique, even paradoxical, emotional resilience.
Yeah, this source gives us such a striking alien perspective on what constitutes humanity's evolution, that willingness to embrace chaos, to actually learn from failure, and to constantly, sometimes messily change and adapt.
And Commander Strike's final message to Earth.
Yeah.
It's something that, even though it's coming from a fictional alien in this source, it resonates so deeply, I think. Don't stop questioning, don't stop changing. Your journey is just beginning. The stars are not your limit, they're your mirror.
Powerful words.
Powerful words indeed. So let's leave you with this final thought. If the stars are truly our mirror, as X-Ray suggests, reflecting our capacity for this bold, raw, and unfinished creation, what are we meant to see within ourselves right now that maybe we haven't dared to explore yet?